Well, welcome to our penultimate session of the afternoon. This is a session on innovation versus disruption with Morten Reitoft, Editor-in-Chief at INKISH TV. Morten is the editor of INKISH. INKISH has become the essential media in the global printing industry with inkish.news and inkish.tv. Morten B. Reitoft is an also in-demand speaker at various events, conferences and webinars, and always delivers alternative, engaging and inspiring alternatives to the topic. Thank you, and over to you, Morten.
Well, thank you very much, Charles. I hope I can live up to the very nice presentation you just did. So why don't we just dig into it, and maybe we can have a chat later if you like and have time for it.
I look forward to chatting later, Morten. Thank you.
Okay, I will get my presentation started here.
In 1942, Albert Einstein was teaching at Oxford University. And one day, he just gave an exam of physics to his senior class of physics students. And he was walking on the campus with his assistant. And all of a sudden, the assistant looked at Albert Einstein and said, "Dr. Einstein, this exam which you just gave to the senior class of physics students, isn't that exactly the same exam you gave to exactly the same class 1 year ago?" Yeah, said Albert Einstein, it's exactly the same. "But Dr. Einstein, how could you possibly do that?" the assistant said. "Well," said Einstein, "the answers have changed."
Now, I've actually always found something to be very true, which is most people don't get those experiences because they never ask. I've never found anybody that didn't want to help me if I asked them for help. I always call them up. I called up, this will date me, but I called up Bill Hewlett when I was 12 years old, and he lived in Palo Alto. His number was still in the phone book. And he answered the phone himself. He said, "Yes?" He said, "Hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old. I'm a student in high school, and I want to build a frequency counter. And I was wondering if you had any spare parts I could have." And he laughed, and he gave me the spare parts to build this frequency counter, and he gave me a job that summer in Hewlett-Packard, working on the assembly line, putting nuts and bolts together on frequency counters. He got me a job in the place that built them. And I was in heaven. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. And that's what separates sometimes the people that do things from the people that just dream about them. You gotta act. And you've got to be willing to fail. You've got to be willing to crash and burn. You know, with people on the phone, with starting a company, with whatever. If you're afraid of failing, you won't get very far.
This is the first time I think that I or Ryanair have ever been invited to a conference by the European Union, because as though most of you know, the European Union spends most of its time either suing me, torturing me, criticizing me, or condemning me for lowering the cost of air travel all over Europe and making life so really difficult for their favorite airlines, which, as we all know, are the high-fare airlines like Air France, British Airways and Lufthansa, who must, of course, be protected at all costs, because they are the future of Europe. The future of Europe lies in people being forced to pay 800 euros for 1 hour flights across the continent. The future of Europe lies in people being forced to pay fuel surcharges for the right to travel on Europe's best airlines run by the Germans, the French and the British. Well, sorry, we like to disagree, which is why I think a conference on innovation is so important. Because if you look at the mess that Europe is in, and you look at the mess that the European economy is in, there's only one way out of it. And it's not going to be a summit of European politicians. It's certainly not going to be a conference held in Brussels, where the last innovative idea came in 1922, I think. Innovation is going to be the way for the European economy to grow, to develop, to create new jobs. And that's the way out of the mess we're in. And that's why I think it's so important that we have 4 young people here today. I'm kind of a little bit nervous that we brought them to Brussels, where I'm afraid that their innovative streak or their spark of innovation might be dulled by a long lunch, an afternoon asleep, followed by an early finish, and then that they'll all become, God help us, politicians or bureaucrats in Brussels, and therefore do nothing to add to the sum of humankind. So I urge you, as quickly as you possibly can, get the hell out of Brussels. go back to your countries and try to stay away from here as much as is humanly possible?
See, the reason why I decided to show these 3 video clips as an introduction to this presentation is because I have decided, or been asked, agreed with the good people from BPIF and in particular with Robert to talk about innovation versus disruption. So we need to figure out first what is the 2 terms and what is the differentiator. So let's dig directly into it. And as I always say, I think that these topics are so wide and broad that to do that in 20-30 minutes is impossible to be conclusive on. So I hope you will find this more like an inspiration for something to think about. So what is innovation? Typically, innovation is really something that a lot of people appreciate. It's something it's a plus word. It is good for people to be innovative, we think, right? It's basically kind of market-driven development. And the reason why I say this is because you see iterations. I will give you examples of this. It's driven by competition. Often people talk about minimal viable solution. It's supposed to be good enough. And to some extent, innovation versus disruption, innovation is a safer investment. I will get back to that as well. So let's take a look at iterations, and I took a liberty of using my own not so pretty face to give an idea about it. So this is an iteration of me version 0.9. You can see that it is not so sharp. It's not in color. It's a little bit dull. It's basically a grayscale image with not so many textures in it, and that is, I mean, you can argue, well, it's good enough, or you can argue that it should be better. But the 1.0 version, you can see that we worked a little bit on the color balance. So I think that regardless of how my face looks from a professional perspective, I think it has a little bit better color, color gray management kind of thing. And when you really start working on something in iterations, you get to maybe something where it is like version 1.5, you get a hat on, you can see the colors are there, and basically you have developed a product that is essentially the same, but it has just got a new skin to it. I used to work in the music industry, and I can give you an example on how that worked in iterations. For example, when we went to one of the biggest music trade shows in the world, it was in Frankfurt at the time, Frankfurt Music Show. Basically, I remember I was a marketing manager. We looked at, okay, what do we think the competition will come with? So if they come with 7.5 watt speakers, we deliver 8 watt speakers. If they have 8 different piano sounds, we have 10 different piano sounds. And that kind of iterations moderated the product step by step in order to make sure that it got to being good enough to being sold, good enough to have a value, but in no ways representing the engineering power of Roland's engineers that are in that company I work for. So that is one thing. Another thing is that if you look at a lot of people talk about minimal viable solution. And, to some extent, I really hate it, because minimum viable solution basically means that you are just doing enough for the next iteration of your product. You're not doing, you can take in skilled labor. You can take in the best people in your area of expertise. And then you end up in a situation where you just do something that is slightly better, but it must be disencouraging for a lot of people to know that they could have done it better. But because of scale of economy, because of the competition in the market, because of how to become as profitable as possible, the minimal viable solution seems to be good enough for a lot of companies. And talking about good enough, you remember those fantastic Nokia 3210 phones? This was, at the time, the world's largest mobile phone company. And I know this story bores everybody now, because we have seen it all from how they failed in positioning themselves and how to react to things. And it's because they have a focus on need to have instead of nice to have. I remember when I saw the iPhone, the first iPhone being presented by Steve Jobs, I wouldn't say I was blown away, because I thought that this phone was probably good enough for me, and I thought the price tag was maybe a little bit too high for me at that time. But on the other hand, when I looked at the phone, I couldn't help think about that it revolutionized how a phone could look, and how it could be positioned into the hands of people. And that was even before you could do MMS on it. It was even before the App Store. It was even before a lot of the things that we take for granted in today's smartphone. I remember when I was participating in a conference in Copenhagen and sitting on the train back home, and I was sitting next to an engineer from Nokia, and I said to him, "So, what do you think about the iPhone that was just introduced a few days before?" And he said, "Well, we at Nokia, we don't believe that people want phones without buttons on it." And I'm so thrilled about this story because it shows precisely what happens if you do iteration after iteration after iteration. It's not enough to just change the color of the skin of the phone. It's not just a matter about adding small features to it, because at some point somebody will compete you out of business, simply because, not because you couldn't do it yourself, but because they are having a different starting point. Last thing in this round is basically the safer investment. I mean, if you have an existing user base, I'm pretty sure that if you have a Nokia 3210, then when the 3310 and 3410 and 3510, whatever comes, they could probably pretty accurate calculate how many would replace the phones for that smaller additional development of the phone. So of course it's safer to do it this way, right? So one of the claims I have here is basically that innovation happens anyway, and it does it because of a few things. I really like this photo because I think it's a wonderful animal, first of all, but I also think that this is quite important because two things is one of the main drivers of innovation in the world, and that's laziness and convenience. We are all lazy. We want it to be as easy as possible to do things. If you think about all the products you have in your kitchen, all the products you have in your domestic sphere, a lot of it is to make things easier and more convenient when you do things. A dishwasher is definitely nice when you're a big family, and you would definitely spend a lot of time on dishwashing in hand in case you didn't have a dishwasher. So that is something that drives us, and it drives, sometimes people say that it is driven by money, and of course it is, because if there's a need and there's a demand for things, there will also be some people who wants to buy it, and that is that balance that you always have to figure out. Then I took this young man into the equation, because I mean, how does this relate to the printing industry? Well, quite a lot of these things are exactly the same thing for a PSP. And to give you a little thing that I'm pretty sure about, and which makes me a little bit sad about this fantastic program made by the organizers of the Visual Media Conference, is that I don't think there's a lot of PSPs actually watching this presentation here. I don't think, I mean, if you look at Intergraph, they have 112,000 members, I think. That is probably around 1 million people in Europe working in this industry. And still, it is so difficult to communicate and get out with the information about both the technology, the business models, everything that really applies to how things could develop in a good way. So when I write forgot, I think, and it's on purpose that I put a male person on the screen right now, because I think a lot of the printing companies, maybe not the big public companies, but a lot of companies have been run by your father or your grandfather. And a lot of these companies, your grandfather or your father, they were probably the really smart businessmen of their time, where they really took the chances. They invested in new technology. They went through fire and water to get the business going. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of PSPs that are sitting, resting and waiting for the good old times to revert. And when I write too comfortable, I was at an event with the Danish Federation of Printers, I think it was just before the Corona. And it was quite interesting to see. That was the General Assembly. And, Denmark is small, so I think there was maybe 40, 50 printing companies represented at this one. And almost all of these CEOs, they came in their BMWs of different sizes, right? And it's nothing wrong about BMW, nothing wrong in being comfortable, nothing wrong in having that as an objective to own a BMW. But just think about it for a moment. I mean, if you look at the printing companies in the industry today, some still make a shitload of money, and some do not make so much money. But it's also a matter of where do you want to go, and that is where innovation versus disruption come in. If you do the same thing you have always done, you will get the results you have always got, right? That is a statement, and it is not true anymore, because customers are changing, market is changing, technology is changing. I mean, all the things around us that makes our business interesting to operate in is changing. So what is disruption in that relation? Before I wrote that this innovation happens anyway, right? Disruption happened because this is about people where they have no consensus. Basically, they could be people coming from a totally different industry, entering into, for example, the printing industry. I think that some of the very innovative printing companies in the world today, the management and the owners, they have no legacy in the industry, so they don't have anything to fall back on. They just do what they find right at that time and with the experience they have from other industries. The starting point is not like the iterations that I spoke about in the beginning, but way more about being precise on that the starting point is here with the technology available right now. And then to some extent, shit happens. I mean, basically, sometimes people start up something where they become extremely successful. It's also, when it comes to innovation, I use my own photos, so now I'm making a little fun. I don't like that guy particular, but I thought he was so different from how I look. So I called it the Giant Leap Morten Reitoft version 5.0. I wouldn't say he's slim, but I would say there's no fat on him, and that is not exactly what we need. But he still have the Stetson on, and he is by means a giant step different from what I am, for example. Instead of talking about minimal viable solutions, we talk about maximum viable solution. You develop the very best you can, because you can, and because you want to, and because you want to be successful. So this is an example with the Starship from SpaceX. I mean, this looks like science fiction, but probably less than 10 years away from where we are today. And just to give you an example, this have a cargo space of 1,000 square feet, or square cubic meters, sorry, and it can hold more than 100 people. The biggest space vehicle today from Boeing, who has been developing machines for NASA in 25 years, 30 years, can hold 7 people. So I mean, again, a giant leap in what is possible. When we talk about, before we spoke about that investments were safer, the new reality is crowdsourcing, and owning is temporary. You don't start a business in the new time just because you want to own it forever. You do crowdsourcing, you develop it, you sell it, you get on with your next project. A lot of the young, new, smart, innovative people, they do more than one business. They do a lot of different businesses in order to make sure that they can develop companies fast enough. This is something that the printing industry can learn from as well, because it is possible to make startups. There's examples like Cloud Printer, examples like Gelato. It's also like companies like HP that acquires different companies, for example, like the SiteFlow. And there's a lot of companies that are really innovative and trying to break out of the normal. And that is what this is about, challenging the normal. This is where the reality is basically defined by your abilities and how you can attract investors, how you can attract the industry, how you can attract the business. So I use this because it moves ahead, and it moves the businesses ahead, but it's also about thinking about what is next, because the disruptors have the ability sometimes to think about what could be really interesting in the future. And sometimes they don't know. Sometimes, as I said, shit happens. Maybe it's just because they end up in a situation where this is interesting. So I'm a printer. So what can I do? Well, I suggest that the most important thing in order to develop your business in a good direction is listen, learn, identify, and do. And you can think that, okay, this is so obvious that it can't be true, but it is true. And the problem is that we have stopped listening in this industry. And maybe it's because the media, including INKISH, is not good enough of bringing the right stories to the market. It can also be because there's some laziness among the PSPs, where they think, okay, we don't really want to spend time on learning because we have our business and we focus on that. can also be that they have totally different sources of information that none of us really knows how to address. And that is, the challenge of everything. We have created more than 1,000 films now. That is, in my humble opinion, a pretty amazing number. And we have films from everywhere in the world, a lot of them from the UK as well. And I think that most of them, and then I haven't said too much, right, are really interesting films from the perspective of getting inspiration, following success stories, listening to both vendors, to specialists, to PSPs, and find out how you can do your business in a good way. And when Robert McClemens asked me to participate in this event, I really liked it. And as you know from the website, we have curated 57 films that in particular I think is interesting in relation to innovation and disruption, and something that I am proud of partnering with BPIF and CID about. And then I'm actually finished now, but I have an announcement, and maybe that doesn't come as a big surprise to you if you saw Deborah Korn's presentation just an hour ago, I think a few hours ago. We're bringing something to the market together called Print Life, and we have a little slogan for how Print Media Center and INKISH will work together. We call it that when 1 + 1 = 11, and it comes actually from one of my good Indian friends who said that instead of saying that if 1 + 1 is greater than 2, then it's a good business. The Indians often say that if 1 + 1 is more than 11, then it's an even better business, and that really emphasizes what we're doing with this very, very dense collaboration that we will very soon introduce. So with that said, I just want to say thank you very much for your time. I hope you found a little bit inspiration, and that you could bear with my half English, half Danish kind of language here. And as always, I of course encourage you to go to INKISH TV and INKISH News. I think we have a very, very good backlog of very, very exciting content that I'm pretty sure can support your business if you are interested. So thank you very much, and back to you, Charles.
Morten, thanks so much for a great presentation, and I'm just checking for questions in the chat. But actually, also thank you for sharing 57 curated films. I mean, what a fantastic resource, and really looking forward to spreading the word. This might be a slightly provocative question. Do you think the industry is sufficiently open to new ideas and curious? And you had a fantastic view across the industry. What's your take on that?
I think it is a provocative question, Charles. But I think the answer might be more provocative, because I think the unfortunate situation, with the way I see it, is that there's a lot of printing companies and their owners who have no idea where to go in the future. And then there's a quite big portion of really, really innovative people that are thinking new ways of how this industry can grow. I don't think we are any near dying or ceasing away. I think we have more opportunities than ever. Also because now print is not just on paper, but it's, everything. I can give you a little insight. In 2 weeks' time, me and my team is going to Israel. And the former general manager of HP Indigo, Alon Bashani, he has invited us to come to one of the companies that he's now chairman, a company called Redefining Meat. That is a 3D printer printing meat. And it is with textures for steaks, with fat, with everything based on plant-based. And, I don't think that the printing industry will start printing meat and printing beef and things like that. But this is just a spin-off of technologies. And that is the most beautiful thing that you can see. Everything from 3D print to printed electronics to all the things that FESPA does, all the things that the Label Expos do, and all the things that you see from commercial printers. And I think that if we really want to grow this business, I think the most important thing is that let's get out, talk to customers. Let's promote what we can do, because we have so many good companies, so many good ideas, and so much technology that is, I'm blown away. It's simply amazing.
And actually, that's what I was getting at with the question a bit, actually. There's so much out there. And, one of the wonders of digital technology is it's quite easy to find and it's quite easy to access.
Yeah.
Actually, it's easy to create, but it's not easy to create well.
No, that's true.
There's a lot of great content out there as well.
So no, I think there's a lot of opportunities, and I think that fortunately there's some very nice, exciting, and brilliant people that have or starting to get into this. So I'm not worried at all.
No, I'm exactly the same, which is why I don't mind being a little bit provocative, because I'm in a very fortunate position here at the BPIF, and we look across the industry. And I guess the irony is that our industry has actually historically always been incredibly entrepreneurial. One of the reasons we have some of these very long-standing, often family-owned companies are that they have great entrepreneurs in their history and often continue to have great entrepreneurs in the current generations. But actually, maybe the industry became a bit static, and the communications revolution that we've gone through over the last 15 years or so, I think has created a lot of new opportunities. And again, we've seen some incredible businesses and business models emerge, and actually we've heard some speakers today touch on that.
Yeah, I think as a final note, maybe from my side, because we're running out of time, is that basically that at some point, I don't know why, but at some point, I think maybe it was in 2008 when the so-called financial crisis hit, that was like a stopping point for a lot of commercial printing companies. And I think that the misunderstanding in our industry is that a lot of people blame that on the financial crisis because it was more difficult to get money. But that was also the time when Google and Facebook broke through in really big numbers. So I think that we were in a paradigm shift where it's about, where commercial print was the premier communication channel for mass communication. That changed almost overnight, and we have still not got 100% into that mantra yet.
I think my background was in web offset printing, and we could see that transition. So we were working with Kodak on their Prosper technology at the time, because we could see this change coming. I think you've actually touched on a question from Deborah. She's made a few comments about printing meat, which suggests she's not wholly in favor of that. But she asked the question, what role does disruption play in innovation?
Say that again, please.
Deborah's asked what role disruption plays in innovation, which I think you've touched on actually.
Yeah, basically both things are a necessity, because if we were all disruptors, it would not be disruption, right? So from that perspective, that is an important thing. I think that disruption is important because also, as she said in her presentation, there is something that is really important in I think in all industries, and that is to have beacons and champions that you thrive for them. And you look at some of the really cool printing companies in the UK. I hope and believe that other printing companies watching their business and see how successful they are, that is an inspiration, not just batching them, basically, right? Because they're good.
Yeah, brilliant. Completely agree with that. Great. Well, thank you so much for presenting. Fascinating. Great to see O'Leary in that clip being his normal diplomatic self as well.
Yeah, he's always so directly, right?
And Steve Jobs too. So fantastic. Okay, well, thank you, Morten. So just to say, we're on to our last session in just a fraction over 15 minutes time. Starts at 4:15. And that's our international panel with Sabine Gelderman from Drupa, Beatrice Close from Intergraph, and Fort Bowers from the USA. So I look forward to seeing everyone at 4:15. Thank you.